Find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary.
The four never performed together again. John Lennon was killed in December 1980, making any reunion permanently impossible. But the reasons for the split will shock you. Because what destroyed the greatest band in human history was not one argument, not one woman, not one bad decision. It was a slow, painful unraveling that took years, involved millions of dollars, broken trust, wounded egos, and four extraordinarily gifted men who had simply outgrown each other. And in this video we are going to walk through every piece of it. No mythology, no legend, just the documented truth of how the Beatles fell apart. Let us go back to where the cracks first appeared. By 1966, the Beatles had stopped touring permanently. The screaming crowds had made it impossible to even hear themselves play on stage, and according to George Harrison in the 1995 anthology documentary, he had made up his mind that he would never tour again as a Beatle. The road had exhausted all four of them. But the moment they stepped off the road, something shifted. 4 years, constant touring had kept them locked together, moving as one unit, dependent on each other for survival in foreign cities and chaotic schedules. The studio was now their only home. And in the studio, without the pressure of performance to unite them, their individual identities began to assert themselves with a force that no band could contain. John Lennon had always been the founding leader, the sharpest tongue, the most restless mind in the group. But by 1968, according to journalist Barry Miles in his biography of Paul McCartney, Lennon was drifting. He had discovered LSD, he had fallen completely under the influence of Yoko Ono, and his artistic interests were moving away from pop music entirely and toward avant-garde sound experimentation, political protest, and personal confession. He no longer wanted to write love songs. He wanted to make statements. He wanted to shout. The album Two Virgins, which he recorded with Yoko Ono in 1968, was essentially 48 minutes of tape loops, distorted sound, and noise, and he submitted it to the Beatles label without any hesitation or irony. That was the world Lennon was living in. Paul McCartney, by contrast, was still completely devoted to the craft of pop music. According to Mark Lewison, widely regarded as the most authoritative Beatles historian alive, McCartney was the most disciplined and driven member of the group during this period. He was in the studio constantly, working on arrangements, pushing for technical perfection, and increasingly taking on a leadership role that the others had not formally given him but that he had assumed by default because someone had to. The problem, according to George Harrison's own account in the anthology, was that McCartney's leadership style felt less like a bandmate's encouragement and more like a director bossing around session musicians. Harrison said plainly that during the Let It Be sessions, McCartney was telling him exactly how to play his guitar parts, what notes to use, what approach to take, and that it made him feel like a sideman, not an equal. George Harrison's frustration had been building for years before it finally exploded. He had entered the band as the youngest member, the quiet one, the guitarist who played what Lennon and McCartney needed him to play. But by the late 1960s, he had grown into a composer of rare sophistication. Songs like Something, Here Comes the Sun, and While My Guitar Gently Weeps were not the work of a junior member finding his feet. They were masterpieces. Eric Clapton, one of the greatest guitarists of the 20th century, was so moved by Harrison's work that he agreed to play on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, later telling interviewers that he considered it an honor. And yet, according to Harrison's own autobiography I Me Mine, published in 1980, he was routinely given only 1 or 2 songs per Beatles album while Lennon and McCartney filled the rest of the space. He had a backlog of dozens of compositions that the band simply never recorded. The resentment this created was deep and legitimate. The White Album, recorded in 1968, was the first clear public signal that the Beatles were no longer a band in the true sense of the word. According to producer George Martin, interviewed in numerous retrospectives, the sessions for the White Album were unlike anything that had come before. The 4 members were often recording in separate rooms at the same time, working on their own songs with minimal input from the others. Lennon had Yoko Ono beside him at every session, which created an atmosphere that the others found deeply uncomfortable. Ringo Starr, the most even-tempered member of the group by every account, was pushed to his limit during these sessions and actually quit the band temporarily in August 1968. He packed his drums and left, telling the others he felt unloved and unnecessary. He returned 2 weeks later to find his drum kit decorated with flowers by the remaining 3, a gesture that temporarily smoothed things over. But the fact that Ringo Starr, Ringo the peacemaker, the one who never made trouble, had walked out told the world everything it needed to know about what was happening inside the studio. Then came the Let It Be sessions in January 1969, and everything that had been simmering came to a full boil. The cameras were rolling for what was intended to be a documentary about the Beatles returning to their roots. Live performances, stripped-down recordings, pure rock and roll. Instead, the cameras captured something that no publicist, no manager, and no record label could spin. They captured a band in the process of disintegrating in real time. According to director Michael Lindsay-Hogg, who filmed the sessions, the tension on camera was only a fraction of what was happening off camera. On film, you can watch McCartney and Harrison argue with barely concealed frustration. You can watch Lennon sitting beside Yoko, detached, present in body but somewhere else entirely. And on January 10, 1969, George Harrison stood up in the middle of a rehearsal, told the others he was leaving, and walked out of Twickenham Film Studios. His exact words, captured on the documentary footage and later released in the 2021 film Get Back, directed by Peter Jackson, were calm and devastating. He told them he would see them around the clubs. Harrison returned after a week of negotiations, but he returned with a condition. Yoko Ono and Linda Eastman, McCartney's girlfriend, would no longer sit in on sessions. The condition was partially honored. The damage was not repaired. Now we come to the business dimension of this collapse, and this is where the story becomes not just sad but ugly. Brian Epstein had managed the Beatles since 1962. He was not a perfect man and not a perfect manager. He made deals that cost the band enormous amounts of money, particularly in merchandising rights, but he was trusted by all 4 of them in a way that no one else ever was or ever would be. According to Peter Brown, Epstein's personal assistant and later a close friend of the band, Epstein functioned as an emotional anchor for the group as much as a business manager. He absorbed conflicts. He mediated disputes. He kept the machine running. On August 27, 1967, Brian Epstein died of an accidental overdose of sleeping pills at his home in London. He was 32 years old. McCartney later said that the moment he heard the news, he knew it was over. Not immediately, not publicly, but in some fundamental way, he knew. Without Epstein, the Beatles created Apple Corps in 1968, a company intended to be a creative utopia. A record label, a film division, a clothing boutique, a talent agency, all run by the artists themselves for the benefit of artists. According to Peter Doggett in his deeply researched book You Never Give Me Your Money, Apple Corps became one of the most expensive experiments in rock and roll history. The clothing boutique lasted 8 months before it was simply given away. The Beatles literally opened the doors one morning and told the public to take whatever they wanted, giving away tens of thousands of pounds worth of stock rather than deal with the business of running a shop. The company was losing £50,000 a week, an almost incomprehensible sum for the late 1960s. The Beatles needed a manager, and the question of who that manager would be is what finally, formally, and irreversibly drove a wedge through the center of the group. Paul McCartney wanted Lee Eastman, his girlfriend's father, a highly regarded New York entertainment lawyer who understood music publishing and artist rights. John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr wanted Alan Klein, an aggressive American music industry operator who had previously managed the Rolling Stones and who had convinced Lennon in particular that he could recover millions in unpaid royalties. According to multiple accounts, including those of the surviving Beatles themselves, Klein impressed Lennon by demonstrating an encyclopedic knowledge of his lyrics in their first meeting. He quoted Lennon back to himself with precision, and Lennon was moved by this. It was, as things turned out, a very expensive impression to make. McCartney refused to sign with Klein. The other 3 signed. And from that moment, the Beatles were no longer 4 people pulling in the same direction. They were 2 factions, McCartney on one side, the other 3 on the other, separated by a management dispute that was also a proxy war for every creative grievance, every personal frustration, and every unresolved tension that had been building for years. Klein proved to be a destructive force. He was later sued by Lennon, Harrison, and Starr for mismanagement, and in 1979 he was convicted of filing a false tax return in the United States. The three Beatles who had voted for him over McCartney's objections were eventually forced to acknowledge that McCartney had been right. The publishing catastrophe made things worse. Northern Songs, the company that owned the Lennon-McCartney catalog, the actual copyright to their music, was publicly traded on the London Stock Exchange. In 1969, a hostile takeover attempt began, and the Beatles failed to secure enough shares to protect their own songs. According to Peter Doggett, Lennon and McCartney were unable to cooperate sufficiently during the crisis to mount an effective response, partly because their relationship had deteriorated so badly by that point that coordination between them was nearly impossible. The songs that had made them the most famous composers on earth ended up controlled by outside shareholders. It was a wound that never healed. Lennon spent years bitter about it. McCartney spent decades and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to buy his own catalog back. The Abbey Road album, recorded in the summer of 1969, was the last time the four Beatles were in the same room making music with any genuine collective intention. According to George Martin, who produced the album, the key to making Abbey Road possible was that everyone agreed to shelve the Let It Be tapes, put aside the business disputes temporarily, and simply make the best record they could. And they did. Side 2 of Abbey Road, the famous medley, is among the most sophisticated pieces of music ever committed to tape by a rock band. But even during these sessions, according to Louison and others, there were arguments, tensions, and moments of barely suppressed hostility. It was four professionals honoring a commitment. It was not four friends making music together. In September 1969, John Lennon walked into a meeting with the other Beatles and told them he wanted a divorce. He used that exact word. According to his own account, given in a 1970 interview with Rolling Stone magazine, he felt a sense of relief the moment he said it out loud. Klein and the others persuaded him to stay quiet publicly, for business reasons, because the band still had contractual obligations and ongoing negotiations. Lennon agreed to keep it private. But privately, he was gone. He was already recording as the Plastic Ono Band. He was already living his post-Beatles life. The public announcement came in April 1970, when Paul McCartney released his debut solo album and issued a self-interview in the press in which he confirmed he was no longer working with the Beatles. Lennon was furious. He felt that McCartney had stolen the moment from him, had turned his departure into McCartney's announcement. The acrimony between them reached a level that would last years and would play out in the lyrics of their solo records, with Lennon writing How Do You Sleep as a direct attack on McCartney, and McCartney responding with veiled references of his own. The Let It Be album, released in May 1970, was itself a final act of betrayal according to McCartney. Producer Phil Spector, brought in by Alan Klein without McCartney's approval, buried the long and winding road under strings, choir, and orchestral overdubs that McCartney had never asked for and did not want. McCartney wrote a letter to Klein demanding the changes be reversed. Klein ignored it. The album was released as Spector had produced it. McCartney later called it the worst thing anyone had ever done to a Beatles record. Legal proceedings consumed the early 1970s. McCartney sued the other three and Alan Klein to dissolve the business partnership. The courts sided with him. The Beatles partnership was legally dissolved in 1975. By that point, the four men were living on different continents, making very different music, and the idea of a reunion, which the public never stopped asking about, had become something between a fantasy and a wound that no one wanted to reopen. John Lennon was shot and killed outside his apartment building in New York City on December 8, 1980. He was 40 years old. With his death, every theoretical possibility of a reunion ended. Not a reformed band, not a one-off performance, not a single song recorded together in a studio. None of it would ever happen. What destroyed the Beatles was not Yoko Ono, though her presence created real tension. It was not Alan Klein alone, though he accelerated the collapse. It was not any single argument or walkout or broken promise. What destroyed the Beatles was the same thing that made them extraordinary in the first place. For individuals of immense talent, ambition, and ego, who had been forged together under pressure and had outgrown the container that held them, they had changed the world. And then, slowly, inevitably, painfully, they went their separate ways. And the world has never quite recovered from the loss.